Now we are talking with the CEO of Lutheran Social Services, Rachel Lustig. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thanks so much for having me.
We're happy to have you. I want to preface this conversation. We are not speculating on ABC pulling the Bachelorette in that situation with Taylor Frankie Paul today, but it
has started a lot of conversation.
Yes, a lot of conversations around domestic violence. And so that's why we wanted to bring you in today, because Lutheran Social Services also does a lot of work with Choices, which is a domestic violence shelter in the area, correct? Talk to us about Choices and what services are offered there.
First off, I want to say that I'm glad that this situation is helping to talk about domestic violence, because so often the situation is hidden and considered shameful. So bringing it to light, I think, is really important. So Lutheran Social Services runs Choices, which is our community's only domestic violence shelter.
Wow.
So a really important service in this community.
How many people do you serve on a regular basis
On
there?
an annual basis, we serve about 1,000, and about a half of them are children.
Wow.
So we have a capacity of about 120 beds.
Okay. And men and women as well. I mean, can we talk about how both can be victims of domestic violence?
Yeah, it is one of the misunderstood things. 1 in 4 women, or 1 in 3 women, will experience domestic violence in their lifetime. What surprises people is that 1 in 4 men will experience domestic violence in their lifetime. So it does happen very often for men, and unfortunately that is something that is not talked about or understood as well as we should.
And I've talked with plenty of domestic violence victims in the past who have turned their situation into a way to help others, and they say it doesn't start with what a lot of people think of domestic violence, which is the physical aspect, but it starts much earlier, and there's a lot more to it.
Domestic violence is ultimately about control. So it begins usually with emotional manipulation, humiliation, insults. It can turn into gaslighting. It can they'll start to control their finances. They'll start to isolate them, so people are no longer connected to their family and friends in the way that they were. And domestic violence often accelerates, or things start to get worse. So violence may not show up for a long period of time, at which point somebody's really in a situation. They may have children, they may have a house, they've built a life together. Well, that's, really hard to see this person you've loved for so long change in that way.
And that was what one woman I had spoken to said, is like, on the outside, to everybody, had the dream life of, a house, 2 cars, kids, and it was this very picturesque, what everybody wants, but on the inside, it was a house of horrors.
Domestic violence is impacting so many people. If you think 1 in 3 women, 1 in 4 men, it's happening in our communities. It's happening to people who are famous. But it could be down the street, in our neighborhood, in our families.
And it's, like you said, it can be psychological too, and not end up physical, which is equally as frightening.
Yeah, it can be controlling in very real ways and impact somebody's ability to live a life. And also that exposure for children. We estimate that somewhere between 3 and 10 million children grow up being exposed to violence in the home.
That's horrible. They should not have to see that, but they can learn behaviors that way as well. It's a vicious cycle, right?
Absolutely. That's why we call it a cycle of violence. You learn that type of behavior. You learn that that's an appropriate way to express anger, as opposed to ways that are much more healthy and constructive.
Now,
go ahead.
No, you're fine.
When it comes to getting out of these situations, how do you even begin?
It's often the hardest situation, because when someone leaves is when they are at the greatest danger. So that is when the most intense violence often happens. So that's why we encourage you to seek help. That's what we're here to help you to do. So one of the things that we will do when you call our hotline, and it's a hotline that we now run together with the Center for Family Safety and Healing, we'll help you to safety plan. We'll help you to recognize how you can find a way to get out of the situation. Maybe the idea is to come to shelter, or maybe you have other options. So you can move into someone, maybe you've got a family member that you can rely on.
Okay, so you guys help people walk through other situations besides just coming to Choices.
Absolutely. We want to make sure that you know that you feel empowered in this situation. And the shelter's not right for everybody. So how do we help people get access to what's going to help them?
the leaving part is the scary thing, is that you don't know what's on the other side of that. And unfortunately, it might take 2 or 3 times to actually leave that situation.
You're right. And that's a protective mechanism. You know, you've got to choose the right moment. Maybe you were going with this option and, you know, okay, if this happens, then we've got to look for another alternative. Call us back. So one of the things I love about what you guys are saying is that you're not bringing any shame to how difficult it is to leave that moment. There's so many people who ask the question, well, why don't they just leave, without recognizing that our survivors don't need your judgment. They need your compassion and your support. This is a difficult decision.
Yeah. And I feel like a lot of times domestic violence situations are almost like similar to mental health ones, where you don't realize what's really happening until you can step back and see for yourself. Everything in hindsight's 2020. You know what I'm saying?
I do know what you mean.
So when these victims are in the middle of this and they're living it, it's hard to identify sometimes that they're actually victims of domestic violence.
It's a tactic that's used. Oh, you caused me to do this, or you're blowing this out of proportion. So you think about it, the violence is usually one of the last things. We're talking the emotional manipulation that can really cause somebody to feel like, oh, this isn't that bad, or certainly people are dealing with worse. So don't worry about being in a bad situation. Call. Get help. You know, one of the alternatives, or one of the options that can be on that line is, well, maybe we should talk about counseling with your partner about what healthy practices can look like. And that might be a constructive option for someone.
I love that, how there are different options. I didn't even know that you guys offered that counseling either.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, when you call the hotline, we'll expose you to the range of services that can be available to you. So you can get a sense of, is this normal? This feels like it's borderline on, this doesn't feel right, or I don't feel safe in this situation. How can you help me to understand what's going on?
And I know you said you guys help a lot of children. So are summers difficult for you? Is there a time of year where you're helping more families?
There are cycles to this. So the holidays are often very difficult for people. You're in that type of environment. People are home. Kids are out of school. That can be an extra stressor to a home. So the school year, when summer's a little bit, it's hot, people get a little hot. So, you know, we do see cycles over the course of the year. So this is a time to kind of keep an eye out for people as we start to get into that summer season.
I did a story with the Dominican Sisters of Peace, and they made blankets for the people coming to your shelter, which was really sweet to talk to them about that effort. But are there other things that you guys need? Can people bring in like donations of toothbrushes or clothing items, anything like that?
Absolutely. Diapers is something we go through
diapers,
regularly.
yeah.
So you can check our website, and there's a list of different things that you can do. People provide us with meals, and we'll help you to be able to provide those services or those supports to us in a way that keeps the people who are in our shelter safe. So that's something that's really important to us, is that we want to make sure that our environment, which is trauma informed, keeps our people safe as they can be.
And how long does that support last? Because it can take a long time to unravel the mental doings of a domestic violence situation.
You're absolutely right. So our shelter is available to people. We don't have a particular prescribed day where you need to be out, and people are different. It often depends on how many children that you may have and what type of job. So we'll work with people on their housing plan. But we recognize that a shelter environment is not the place to stay long-term, particularly for children. So we like to keep people in it for as short as period as we can do so constructively.
Okay. Thank you so much for coming on. Yeah. Anything else you'd like to share today? Any upcoming events with Choices happening in the future?
Well, October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and we will bring people together to kind of break the stigma about domestic violence. So we'd love your support and your continued help to raise the issue, raise the importance of the issue.
And there's no shame with it.
No
we
shame.
Cannot make that clear enough. So thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.